I'm delighted to be joined today by Alexander Downer, who is Australia's Minister for Foreign Affairs for a record-breaking 11 and a half years. Since 2014, he has been the Australian High Commissioner here in London. The UK is party to 50 or 60 free trade agreements through its membership of the EU. What do you think the prospects are of the UK rolling over those agreements, that is, entering into those agreements on the same terms as exist now, but on a bilateral basis? And do you think any of those countries will take advantage of this opportunity to try to renegotiate any of the terms of those agreements with the UK?
Well, the only terms that would be worse for the UK would be more protectionist terms, and I don't think they're going to do that. I think that if anything, they may just roll over these agreements in the short term. We'll have to wait and see. But in the medium term, they may turn to you and say, we'd like, nevertheless, better conditions to be inserted into these agreements. But by that, they would be looking at less protection than exists in the agreements with the EU. Well, you would be well advised to accept that offer. That wouldn't be worse terms, they would be better terms. But they probably in time would want to make some changes. But I don't know, I think you say 50 agreements, but a lot of them are agreements with Andorra and Monaco and Liechtenstein and so on, so perhaps you don't want to sweat on that too much. But of the ones that are really important to you, there'd be the trade agreements with Switzerland, with countries like South Korea and Mexico, which are big economies, and obviously Canada, the most recently negotiated one by the EU, Japan. The EU has negotiated but not brought into effect yet an agreement with Japan. Incorporating these in the short term, it'll depend on their cooperation, but that might not be too difficult. But I suspect in time they will decide they want to make the agreements even better, and you would be wise to accept those offers.
Okay, well, we've seen the spark of some difficulty already in the US, New Zealand and Brazil are arguing about the way the EU and the UK are suggesting splitting WTO quotas. I'd be interested to know the Australian perspective on that and how you think the debate relating to those quotas might unfold.
Well, this is a short-term issue, so this isn't about the free trade agreements. This is about the current situation where the European Union, which is highly protectionist in a lot of areas, let's not beat around the bush, there is very heavy protection in the European Union in a whole range of different economic sectors, has a system of what are called tariff rate quotas. So quotas in thousands of tonnes of product that can be sold into the European Union at much lower tariff rates than the standard tariff rate. Now, our basic view is that the New Zealanders and the Brazilians and the like are completely right. So on leaving the European Union argues, well, if you take an average of perhaps the last 3 years, of all of the, say, beef that has been exported to the European Union, a certain amount has gone to the UK. So we will reduce our tariff rate quota in the European Union by that much. And the UK will then have a separate tariff rate quota, which is the remainder, which is the amount that was exported to the UK over the past 3 years. Now, we think this is a pretty bad deal for us. We think that the EU should keep the tariff rate quotas that currently exist even without the UK, and the UK should make separate arrangements with our countries to make sure that we have substantial access to the British market. And the British government says it's for free trade, so we would like to hold them to that. If we go along with the current plan, then some of the quotas which we will have, which will be, as far as the UK is concerned, will be so small that it won't be worth our while shipping the product to the UK. And so in that sense, we'll have lost the quota, or lost a part of the quota. And we'll have a smaller quota within the rest of the EU. So we're very sympathetic with New Zealand and Brazil, and I know they signed a letter. We didn't sign the letter, but Argentina and so on, these countries are pretty unhappy about this plan, so we share their concerns.
And how do you think that is then going to be resolved?
Well, the British government's going to have to think about that, and so for that matter is Brussels, because they have in the end to get the WTO to agree to this adjustment to the tariff rate quotas. And the WTO works by consensus, and as you already know, our countries are resisting this simple splitting of the quotas plan that the EU and the UK have developed. So they'll have to think of some alternative plan that's more acceptable to those countries. And I would have thought changing the way the quotas work in the UK, so that instead of being country-specific quotas, they're global quotas, and so all of the relevant countries can compete against each other for a share of that market would be a much better way to go. Good for the UK, because it creates a more competitive market, and fine for a country like Australia, which is prepared to take its chances competing with Brazil and Uruguay and Argentina and New Zealand. We don't always win every competition, of course, and a lot of people in the UK know that sometimes we lose, but we're always up for a competition. We're always up for the fight, so we would rather do it that way.
Alexander, thank you for sparing the time to join us today, and thank you for your insights on what is a matter of vital national interest for the UK.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure.